Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
I'm Jason Miller. Tonight on the Evan Miller Report, the White House has said that a U.S. counterterrorism operation in January accidentally killed 2 hostages who were being held by Al-Qaeda. We have the latest on tonight's program. Also on tonight's program, Boko Haram militants are adequate ammunition as the Nigerian army advances in that country. NATO says a big military buildup is on the rise on the Russian-Ukrainian border. This as Russia and Argentina agree on framework for new energy deals. And in Australia, a boy 14 is charged over an Australian terrorism plot as an Islamic center responsible for those 2 teenagers charged with terrorism-related offenses closes its doors. We have all those stories and more, plus the latest in the UK elections and the sentencing of David Petraeus on tonight's Evan Miller Report, plus Corey Evans.
Thank you, Jay. European immigration officials are ready to hemorrhage money to get the influx of illegals under control. The prosecution rests as the jury decides the fate of the Boston bomber, as do all the smarty-pants Boston lawyers. Comcast is cutting the cable on its Time Warner merger, or so we hear through the grapevine. Let's just hope that they don't reach for the Mucinex now that it's recalled. TurboTax's maker is getting ready for a major lawsuit across America. And what is Dr. Phil doing in my entertainment news? You'll find that out in tonight's Evan Miller Report, your conservative news source. Starting now.
Live from Southern California, this is the Evan Miller Report. Jason Miller with news and politics, Corey Evan with business and entertainment. This is the Evan Miller Report on SHR Media and Public Press Radio. Here now, Jason Miller.
And a very good evening on this Thursday, April the 23rd, 2015. I'm Jason Miller along with Corey Evan. And Corey Evan, I think it is the first time we can pretty much say for the rest of the country, it looks like rain is in the air.
Yes, I expect it to rain
Absolutely right. We'll have that latest weather forecast near the end of the broadcast tonight with the BBC Met Office on the latest weather in your neighborhood on the program tonight. But first, ladies and gentlemen, we start off tonight where the White House saying today that a U.S. counterterrorism operation back in January accidentally killed 2 hostages who were being held by the likes of Al-Qaeda. Warren Weinstein, an American, and Giovanni Loparto, an Italian, were killed in the raid in the border region of Afghanistan and Pakistan. President Obama described this morning it as a painful loss he profoundly regretted. Well, that's a first for the nation, ladies and gentlemen, isn't it? The 2 other Americans thought to be Al-Qaeda members were also killed, one of them in the same raid. The White House said Amoka Faraki, an Al-Qaeda leader, was killed in that operation, and Andam Gandhi, once regarded as a spokesman for the militant group, was also killed in a separate raid. Unnamed officials told the AP news agency the attack that killed the hostages was a CIA drone strike. The president, speaking at the White House this morning in the White House press room about the operation that killed the hostages, said the U.S. had launched the raid in the belief that the target was an Al-Qaeda compound with no civilians present. As commander-in-chief, he said, he took full responsibility for the operation. The White House said compensation would be paid to the families of the hostages. Mr. Weinstein's wife, Elaine, said in a statement that the family was, quote, devastated. Those who took Warren captive over 3 years ago bear ultimate responsibility, she added in that statement. She thanked several members of the U.S. Congress and other unnamed officials from the FBI, but said assistance received from other elements of the U.S. government was inconsistent and disappointing. I wonder what she was referring to, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think we'll ever know. And if we do know, it's going to come out much later. Back to the story, though. Ms. Weinstein also criticized the Pakistani government and military, who said treated her husband's captivity as more of an annoyance than a priority. President Obama said the operation was a compliance with the White House's counterterrorism protocols. Moving on to Nigeria tonight, where Boko Haram insurgents in northern Nigeria have now run out of weapons and ammunition. And this as the Nigerian army is advancing on the militant group's remaining territory in Borno State's Sabasa Forest, according to military sources and residents who talked to local reporters in the region today. The intensified military operation by Nigerian and coalition forces has reportedly weakened the Islamic militant group and cut their arms supply. The Boko Haram terrorists have run out of arms and ammunition as the military intensified attacks on the Sabasha Forest. A resident of Todd village of Deborah, who narrowly escaped from the area, told Vanguard News in Abuja. You can find more than 500 members of the insurgents, with only a few of them having rifles, and even when one or two of them have rifles, it's like a stick, as they have run out of ammunition because the usual supplies they get are not forthcoming. Coalition airstrikes and ground troops have stormed the forest, which covers more than 23,000 square miles across Borno, Yobe, Gombe, and Bauchi states in Nigeria's northeast. Nigeria's Defense Headquarters spokesman, Major General Chris Okodi, told the Vanguard News Agency Thursday that the operation had pushed out many Boko Haram fighters. Residents told Leadership newspaper in Abuja some militants have fled into the nearby woods of Yamtake, Tabi, and Jagro villages in the Dembo local government area of Borno State. Stay with the Evan Miller Report. We'll keep you up to date on the latest coming out of Nigeria. Over to Russia tonight, where NATO's chief on Thursday reported a sizable Russian military buildup on the border with Ukraine, and said he would enable pro-separatists from Moscow to launch a new offensive with little warning. This coming from NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, who said Russia has substantially stepped up supplies to the rebels, as well as providing them with advanced training and equipment like drones, despite a ceasefire. Making an accusation of their own, Russian officials said U.S. military instructors were training Ukrainian National Guardsmen in urban fighting techniques in the same eastern regions where Ukrainian forces and separatists have been fighting for the past year. In Washington, the U.S. State Department rejected the Russian claims of U.S. trainers in the eastern Ukraine, saying all the activity was in western Ukraine near the border with Poland. According to State Department spokeswoman and BS artist Maria Harf, she told reporters, quote, "We've been doing this for about 20 years now," calling the Russian statement ridiculous. Stoltenberg said the reported Russian moves undermine the ceasefire declared in eastern Ukraine and violates the Minsk agreements entered into by Moscow. He said more than 1,000 pieces of Russian military equipment have been moved over the past month, including tanks, artillery, and defensive units. Staying in Russia, sister country Argentina having signed a series of framework agreements on economic and energy cooperation following talks in Moscow today. Argentine President Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner and Russian leader Vladimir Putin hailed their cooperation as a comprehensive strategic partnership. Ooh, where have we heard partnership before? Ladies and gentlemen, if you've done your homework, you know what that is. The agreements include Russia's investment in hydroelectric plants and a nuclear power plant in Argentina. There was also a memorandum of cooperation on defense. Correspondents in the region say the Kremlin is keen to boost trade relations with Latin America to offset the effects of sanctions imposed by Europe and the U.S. over the Ukrainian crisis. Argentina is looking for foreign investment as it battles U.S. hedge funds throwing its effort to restructure a defaulted debt in that country. Among the framework agreements was a Russian pledge to finance a hydraulic power plant on Argentina's Neuquén River. Russia's Rostom Nuclear Corporation has also agreed to build a new reactor at Argentina's Athok 3 nuclear plant as well. Rostom chief Sergei Karluk said he hoped the final deal would be signed by the end of the year. Mr. Poon said the project would bring the latest Russian technology to Argentina. He added that Russia supports Argentina in its attempts to have direct talks with the UK over the disputed Falkland Islands as well, known in Argentina as the Malavans. All right, folks, I'm going to go ahead and send it over to Corey Evan up at our news desk in Los Angeles. He has the latest on the EU migrant crisis currently going on in Europe, as well as some stories out of Japan as well this evening. Corey, take it away.
Consider it taken. European leaders are to triple funding for search and rescue operations aimed at migrant boats in the Mediterranean following crisis talks in Brussels. This from the BBC. The EU will also look at ways to capture and destroy smugglers' boats and deploy immigration officers to non-EU countries, officials said. Several EU member states have promised more ships and other resources. The summit comes after more than 750 people died on a boat crossing from Libya on Sunday. Earlier, funerals for 24 of the victims were held in Malta. The number of people fleeing war and poverty in the Middle East and Africa has risen sharply in recent months. More than 35,000 are thought to have crossed from Africa to Europe this year, and some 1,750 have died while attempting this. The estimated toll from Sunday's capsizing was the worst on record. The boost in funding to some 120 million euros, about 86 million pounds, about $121 million, my estimate, brings spending back up to about the level of Mare Nostrum, an Italian-run search and rescue operation that was cancelled last year. Several member states pledged additional naval resources on Thursday. The UK, in the past a leading advocate of reducing naval patrols, said it would contribute helicopter carrier HMS Bulwark, 2 patrol boats, and 3 helicopters. Well, that's jolly nice of them. Germany, France, and Belgium also offered ships. Human rights groups are already criticizing the summit for failing to expand the operational area of EU-led naval patrols, which could have taken them closer to the Libyan coast. Unless the ships are in the right place, they argue, migrants will continue to drown. And even if naval operations manage to rescue the vast majority, there are bitter disputes about how to deal with the tens of thousands who make it to safety. Britain, for example, has said it will provide significant naval support, but it won't accept more asylum seekers. Some people in southern Europe say that's not enough. The burden has to be more equitably shared. Define equitably. But there is no common asylum and immigration policy within the EU. My point exactly. Different countries have very different priorities. It will take years to get the balance right. This summit is only the start. This according to one source at the BBC. Stay with us here at the Evan Miller Report. We will give you an update on the latest out of the European migrant crisis as details become available. In the meantime, twin blasts from the Calbuco volcano in southern Chile sent vast clouds of ash into the sky. This from the AP. And it increases concerns that the dust could contaminate water, cause respiratory illness, and ground more flights. The volcano erupted Wednesday afternoon for the first time in more than 4 decades, spewing out a plume of ash more than 6 miles high. Emergency officials were taken by surprise and had only a few minutes to issue an alert. Calbuco had another spectacular outburst early Thursday with lightning crackling through a dark sky turned reddish-orange by the explosion. I saw it on video, ladies and gentlemen, watching Fox News early, and I was shocked to see it.
Sounds like
anyway,
something out of a sci-fi film.
Absolutely does. As the ash cloud spread Wednesday, quote, people went into a state of panic, according to Miguel Silva Diaz, an engineer who lives in Puerto Montt, a city about 14 miles from the volcano. Then at around 1 a.m., I heard a loud noise as if somebody had detonated an atomic bomb. That's one way of putting it. No injuries were reported, and the only person reported missing since the eruption was located Thursday. Authorities evacuated 4,000 people as gas and ash continued, and they closed access to the area around the volcano, which lies near the cities of Puerto Varas and Puerto Montt, some 620 miles south of Santiago. The Chilean National Geology and Mining Service warned that people should prepare for a third and even more aggressive eruption. President Michelle Bachelet declared a state of emergency, saying the eruption of Calbuco was more serious and unpredictable than the one last month at the Villarrica volcano, which also forced the evacuation of thousands. The short-term dangers related to the ash also include eye and skin infections as well as water contamination, according to Bernardo Martorell, a physician and the head of the Sanitary Planning Division at Chile's Health Ministry. The 6,500-foot Calbuco last erupted in 1972 and is considered one of the top 3 most potentially dangerous among Chile's 90 active volcanoes. LATAM and other airline companies canceled flights to and from Puerto Montt because airborne ash can severely damage jet engines. By Thursday afternoon, much ash had made its way into Villa La Angostura, Argentina, a small town about 56 miles northeast of Calbuco. Cars and streets were coated with a thin layer of ash, but people were otherwise going about their business. We will keep an eye on this story and bring you the latest as it becomes available. And the day after Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe sat down for his first substantial talks with China's Xi Jinping, 3 of his cabinet ministers on Thursday visited the war shrine Beijing sees as a symbol of Tokyo's violent past. This from the Gulf News. Visits by the 3 women have the potential to muddy diplomatic waters that were starting to clear after their nationalist boss sat down with the Chinese president on the sidelines of a regional summit in Jakarta. More than 100 Japanese lawmakers went to the shrine on Wednesday to coincide with its spring festival and as official arrangements for the Xi-Abe meet. Abe had asked his ministers not to visit before the talks happened, according to Xi Press. Xi and Abe held discussions in Jakarta for about 30 minutes, their first lengthy powwow since both men took the helms of the nations that are barely at odds over history and current territorial disputes. Abe later told reporters that they had a very meaningful summit meeting and bilateral relations were improving. In Tokyo Thursday, Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga, speaking after Yamatani's pilgrimage, said it should have no bearing on warming China ties. Masaru Ike, professor emeritus at Keio University and an expert on Japanese diplomatic history, said shrine visits like this were somewhat inevitable, but unlikely to be a disaster. But Abe could not stop ministers from going in a private capacity, he said, pointing to the political need for conservative politicians to appease their support base. It's often said that Japan-China relations are cold politically, but hot economically. In Beijing, Foreign Ministry spokesman Hong Lei said China was strongly opposed to visits that, quote, represent their erroneous attitude toward history. Sounds about right there, Jay. And I'll go ahead and send it back to you for the updates on the UK elections and such. But first, I want to get your thoughts on the latest out of the Sino-Japanese tie-up here.
It's tied up. That's what I got to say on that. Just tied up.
And I'm sure they're not tied up for the right reason. As I told you folks yesterday, Mr. Abe stopped short of actually apologizing for what the country did during World War II. So you can tell that today is just more keeping up appearances.
Yeah, it's typical BS we're getting out of Asia these days. It's
yes.
That is the effect. If you live in the country of Japan and you actually watch the local news out of Japan these days, ladies and gentlemen, Japan has changed somewhat, but some people have the same opinions about America today as they did during World War II. It's not surprising to me. It may shock some of our audience here, but that's just what it is coming out of Japan. All right, Corey Evan with the latest coming out of Japan, that volcano in Chile tonight, and of course the Mediterranean migrant crisis. Thank you very much for that, Corey. We'll be back a little later in the program with the rest of the day's national news, including the latest on the Tsarnaev trial in Boston. Back to some international news out of the UK. A 14-year-old boy from Blackburn in that country has been charged by UK prosecutors with 2 counts of inciting terrorism in sister country Australia. The boy is accused of inciting another person to carry out an attack at an Ethnic Day event with the aim of killing or seriously injuring people. He is also accused of inciting another person to behead someone in Australia. Ethnic Day is commemorated on the 25th of April in memory of Australian and New Zealand soldiers who have died in war. The boy, who cannot be named for legal reasons because of his age, is believed to be the youngest person to be charged with a terrorism offense in the UK, according to the BBC's Home Affairs correspondent Daniel Southford. He was charged after officers from the Northwest Counter-Terrorism Unit in the UK and Lancashire Constability executed a search of an address in Blackburn back on April the 2nd. Officers had examined a number of electronic devices and uncovered communications between the teenager in Blackburn and a man in Australia, said a statement from Greater Manchester Police. A Islamic center in Australia, attended by 2 teenagers charged with terrorism-related offences, has closed its doors. The Al Faran Islamic Center in the southwest Melbourne said it believed that it was the best course of action given the pressure it had received. 5 teenagers were arrested last week after anti-terror raids. Police said the men were planning to carry out an attack during the Asnek Memorial event as well. The Al Furqi Islamic Center said the decision to close it had not been taken lightly. In a statement it said, "We believe that given the constant harassment, pressure, and false accusations leveled against the center, particularly by media and politicians, this is the best course of action for the protection of the local community, its members, and the broader Muslim community that is often implicated in these Daeshist campaigns." End of quote. The center and bookstore had come under scrutiny after it was revealed that 3 of those charged after the raids had attended it. Hasna Kosbek and Zivda Bensdam, both 18, have both been charged with conspiracy to commit acts done in preparation for or planning terrorist acts. To the UK elections now, the Conservative Tory party have continued the trend of a small but consistent lead over the Socialist Labour Party in a new poll, while the moderate Lib Dems saw their support drop. The party's popularity rose to 36% in the latest Comres telephone call for ITV News in London, and the Daily Mail up by 2 points, while Labour dropped 1 to 32%. However, with 14 days to go until the election, the findings still leave them short of a majority of seats in the House of Commons. Despite seeing a drop of 2 points to 10%, the UKIP party are marginally ahead of the Lib Dem party, who dropped 4 points to 8%. The Greens remained relatively unchanged on 5%, up 1 point. According to ITV News' election analyst Colin Rawlings, forecast the Conservatives would be still the largest party in Parliament after adjusting the poll results for England and Wales and combining them with a recent Scottish poll of polls for the Scottish figures. With support dipping for the Lib Dem party, the poll found 2 in 5, which is 41% of those voted for the party back in 2010, would not consider voting for them again in this election. However, a quarter of them, which is about 25% of both Conservative and Labour voters, said they would consider voting Lib Dem. Meanwhile, the poll found Conservative voters are almost twice as likely, which is about 27%, as Labour's 14% and the Lib Dems' 15%, to say that they would consider voting for the UKIP party. And that concludes the latest international news. Now it's time for the national news with Corey Evan.
Thursday in the defense. There we are. Prosecutors called their final witnesses and then rested their case Thursday in the death penalty trial of Boston Marathon bomber Dzhokhar Tsarnaev. The defense is set to begin presenting its case for a life in prison sentence on Monday. The focus will shift to Tsarnaev's youth. He was 19 when the bombings took place, and the influence of his older brother and fellow bomber Tamerlan. The penalty phase trial, which began Tuesday, thus far has taken the jury back to the horrific suffering that began with the April 15, 2013 twin bombings. Over the first 2 days, the government called 12 witnesses. Jurors heard wrenching testimony from women who lost limbs and men who continue to grieve the loss of a brother, sister, niece, or stepson. The government sought to show that a series of aggravating factors, including the cruel nature of the bombings and the targeting of vulnerable victims, warrant the death penalty for Tsarnaev. David King, a trauma surgeon at Massachusetts General Hospital and a U.S. Army combat surgeon, testified Thursday that the injuries he saw the day of the blasts resembled those he'd seen when he was deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan. King says Martin Richard, who died in the blast, would have been particularly vulnerable because the explosion was close by and low to the ground. Mark Fucariel, an amputee who was inches from the bomb Tsarnaev planted, also testified. When the bomb went off, Fukaril's body caught fire and was filled with shrapnel. So severe were his injuries that he was the last bombing victim to be released from Massachusetts General Hospital. Fukaril entered the courtroom in a wheelchair. Tsarnaev entered through a door located about 2 feet to Fukaril's right. Fukaril glared at him as he passed by and sustained his stare after Tsarnaev took his seat. The defendant did not look in Fukaril's direction. Of course he didn't. Jurors saw a chilling video of a crowd scene in which friends were gathering and hugging outside the Forum restaurant when Tsarnaev walks up and stops behind them. A few minutes later, everybody looks their left when their first bomb goes off. The smoke fills the screen and all goes dark. Fukaril, by the way, has said he underwent nearly 70 surgeries and takes more than 70 pills a day. Ongoing treatment puts him at numerous risks. The same jury that convicted Tsarnaev on all 30 criminal charges is deciding his fate. He'll get the death penalty only if all 12 jurors vote for capital punishment. If even one votes in opposition of the death penalty, he'll receive life in prison with no possibility of parole at our expense.
Not good.
Not good at all, I'm afraid, Jay, because there was one article that I read this weekend on The Weekender, if you caught it, Jay. You heard the article about the parents of the 8-year-old boy that died in this actually arguing against the death penalty, which I don't get why you wouldn't want the person who killed your son to face punishment. But I digress, ladies and gentlemen.
I don't know. I don't pretend to know what the pain of those parents are going through. It is obviously their opinion of what they want, but honestly, I think a lot of Americans don't agree with that family, and they want him to see the maximum punishment that could possibly be put forth. It's not going to be an easy decision for that jury to make on that.
Not at all. I hope that none of them take it lightly.
All right. What else do you got this evening in national?
I've also got the Pentagon facing a significant challenge in trying to gain the trust of some American security firms, which at least publicly remain skeptical of U.S. spying activities following the leaks by ex-security contractor Edward Snowden. This from Voice of America News. U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter aims to begin rebuilding some of that confidence as he embarks on a 3-day visit to California's Silicon Valley, which is home to some of the largest high-tech, corporations and startup companies. The Pentagon chief will give a much-anticipated address Thursday at Stanford U, during which she's expected to appeal to the tech industry to work closely with the federal government in the cybersecurity field. Among the notable initiatives Carter is expected to unveil is the creation of a permanent Defense Department outreach center aimed at scouting emerging and breakthrough technologies, according to a defense official. The center, called the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, will be staffed by what officials say is an elite group of active duty and civilian personnel who will try to recruit some of the industry's top technological minds. Carter acknowledged the job of reaching out to the tech community has been made more difficult by Snowden's leaks of secret intelligence documents, which have exposed numerous domestic and international surveillance operations. In short, ladies and gentlemen, Carter has got quite the mountain to climb, and I think he's going up at an 80-degree angle at least. And on that note, I think it's time to send it to break. But when we come back, Comcast calling it off with Time Warner? Sounds like a real dramatic end, just like their Mucinex sponsorship now that they're being recalled. TurboTax and lottery and unemployment lawsuits? Sounds like a po' boys kind of day there. And Dr. Phil talks Bruce Jenner, a.k.a. Dude looks like a lady! And Jay, what do you got?
Trying to still get over that singing, because I'm Aerosmith, my goodness.
No, I'm not. Nowhere near. And I won't be signing up for Idol anytime.
Ladies and gentlemen, because he's going to entertain you. Oh boy, we got something to look forward to tonight. Also coming up in the DC news tonight, former CIA Director David Petraeus has been put on probation and fined. We'll tell you how long that probation and how much money he's got to pay the taxpayers on tonight's program. Congress votes against European boycotts of Israeli settlements. That's in the DC news. And Hillary Clinton approved a Russian uranium deal after $2 million donation to the Clinton Foundation. We have that story and more on the Evan Miller Report, your conservative news source, when we return after the break. As we go to break, we'd like to remind you of the 15th annual Eagle Forum Conference coming up on May the 2nd. For more information, you go to eagleforumofcalifornia.org. That's eagleforumofcalifornia.org. If you can't come to the conference, you can join SHR Media on May the 2nd, starting at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard. That's 12 Eastern Time on SHR Media and Pundit Press Radio. We'll be back in just a few moments on the SHR Media Network.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
How you doing? John Grant here. When I'm not slaving over a hot microphone on the 405radio.com Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, I check out Sean and Clint here at Sackheads Radio. We all appreciate the best political bloggers, writers, and commentators. We either get them on our shows or we make fun of them, as it should be. So check us out live Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern or forever on the podcasts on the 405radio.com.
This is Tammy Jackson, inviting you to join me on the Tammy Jackson Show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific on the 405radio.com. Put down that remote and tune into the show that covers politics, guns and the Second Amendment, religious liberties, sanctity of life, the military, and more. I host newsworthy guests and work hard to be a conservative radio show that's not like all the others. So save Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific for me, Tammy Jackson, on the 405media.com.
Hello, I'm Paul, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is my professor, Dr. Larry Arnn, on the separation of church and state.
America's founders believed in the separation of church and state, in that the country was not to have an official religion or an official sect. But that did not mean that government was to be hostile to religion, or even indifferent to religion, as many today argue. In fact, America's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, includes both a reference to God as the author of the laws of nature and a confident assertion that human beings are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Far from being hostile or indifferent to religion, America's founders understood the theology of the Declaration to be an essential part of the education of citizens.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.org.
Hi, this is Rooster from Outcry Radio. Catch me here on Blog Talk Radio every Saturday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or follow my blog. Now, back to the Sackheads.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Radio.
In a moment, cancer changed our lives forever.
We were told nothing could be done to enjoy these final moments together.
But in that moment, when all seemed lost,
St. Jude Children's Research Hospital gave us hope.
Because at this moment, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital is saving lives with pioneering research and care. We're changing the way the world treats childhood cancer by sharing our discoveries with doctors and scientists everywhere.
And we'll never have to pay St. Jude for anything, ever.
At this moment, she wants to be in her own bed.
I want to be back at school with my friends.
I want to be outside playing.
Please take a moment and join St. Jude in finding cures and saving children. Visit stjude.org.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
You just had to say that, please, Charnay. There's the closing bell. Never mind. Let's just do the business report. The Dow gained 20 points at 18,058. The Nasdaq gained 20 points at 50.56, and the S&P 500 gained, you guessed it, almost 5 points at 21.12. The number of Americans getting fired is hovering near the lowest levels in almost 15 years, indicating that slowdown in hiring last month will prove temporary, according to Bloomberg Business. An average 284,500 workers a week filed claims for jobless benefits over the past month, according to Labor Department data issued Thursday in Washington. The 282.5 average reached in early April was the lowest since June 2000. Another report showed sales of new homes slumped more than forecast in March, ending the strongest quarter in 7 years. Note. The lack of job dismissals is a sign of a healthy labor market. They say that is typically consistent with larger gains in payrolls than the disappointing 126,000 increase in March. A rebound in employment would help bolster the consumer spending that accounts for almost 70% of the economy, they say. The Labor Department reports showed applications for unemployment insurance payments increased by 1,000 to 295,000 in the week ended April 18th. The figures correspond to the week the government surveys employers to calculate the monthly payroll data. Fewer than 300,000 claims were filed for the 7th consecutive week, they say.
They say? My.
Yes, they do say a lot. Absolutely do. And guess what, Jay? They say over at, forgive me, Al Jazeera, Quality Arab Television, and Death to America. Speaking of television, Comcast plans to drop its $45 billion offer to buy Time Warner Cable in the face of opposition from U.S. regulators, according to Bloomberg reported today, citing people with knowledge of the matter.
I had that day. Hey, bartender, can I get a sherry here with a universal Comcast cherry on top, please? Thank you. Back to you.
Yeah, and I will have a glass of milk and make it strawberry. Any rate, the cable operator could announce its decision on the merger as soon as Friday, Bloomberg said. The proposed deal would have combined the nation's two largest cable companies. The move drew criticism from open internet advocates who charged the merger would have reduced the choices consumers have for access to the web. The two companies serve about half the broadband internet customers in the U.S., and neither of them are installed in my studio. Come on, guys. Just spend the money that you would have spent on this, and someone bury some wires near my place so I can get decent broadband in here. I need it. At any rate, sources told Reuters that the FCC reviewers told staff at the agency in a briefing on Wednesday that they plan to recommend taking the merger issue to an administrative law judge for hearing. This action would amount to the FCC trying to block the deal. Comcast and Time Warner representatives declined to comment on any plans to drop the merger. The decision comes in spite of $17 million Comcast had spent on pushing the deal in ads on its 128 lobbyists who pushed for approval, according to the Washington Post. Last week, Bloomberg reported that attorneys at the Justice Department's Antitrust Division were nearing a recommendation to sue to block the merger, citing concerns for consumers. Well, Charter Communications had lost out to Comcast in a bid to acquire Time Warner. A Charter spokesman had no comment on the Comcast Time Warner deal or what Charter plans to do next. However, Charter's controlling shareholder, Liberty Media, has indicated continuing interest. Oh boy, that's great, ladies and gentlemen.
We got rid of one, now we have to deal with another. And ladies and gentlemen, I have seen Charter's likes of their cable service. Not too good.
I can attest to that. And I can also attest to this being a surprise out of ABC Los Angeles. The company that makes Mucinex has issued a voluntary recall on certain lots of its products because of incorrectly labeled drug facts. The recall was for the liquid bottles of Mucinex Fastmax nighttime cold and flu, cold and sinus, severe congestion and cough, and cold, flu, and sore throat. A retailer confirmed that although the labels on the front of the bottle listing all the active ingredients were correct, the label on the back may have the wrong drug facts. Anyone who bought a recalled product is asked to dispose of it by either mixing the medicines with an unpalatable substance like kitty litter or used coffee grounds, placing the mixture in a sealed plastic bag, or just throw the container away. You can also receive a replacement coupon for any Mucinex product using an online form. And you can give them a call at 888-943-4215 from 8 to 8 Eastern Standard Time with questions. Or you can go to the Mucinex website, and we will post this up on the Facebook page, facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report. How about that, Jay? Mucinex being recalled. So much for Mucinex in and mucus out.
Yeah, I'm all clogged up. Excuse me as I go blow my nose.
Yes, and then...
Okay, continue.
This last one, Domino's Pizza trades at an all-time high after putting in dazzling comp growth during the first quarter. There seems to be a thought amongst investors that pizza is a red-hot category, with Papa John's, Papa Murphy's, and Rave Restaurant all in rally mode today, according to the stock market. Yes, it's true. And last time Domino's made the news for resisting Obamacare's changes, they're up 10% in the stock markets today. And though the contribution of mobile wasn't broken down by Domino's, retail analysts see it as a large difference maker when comparing the company to the sluggish growth at McDonald's. Yeah, I'm thinking one of these times we got to meet up for pizza, Jay. At least for one of our specialty shows, if we will.
Yes, and we can have a pizza party.
Yes, it's been a while since we've had one, so we'll put that in the plans. At any rate, that's the business report for today. I'll send it back to Jay with the DC news.
Thank you very much, Corey Evan with the business news, with your latest and what you got with pizza. All right, now over to the DC news. As Corey mentioned, former CIA Director David Petraeus, also a retired U.S. four-star general, has been put on probation and fined for leaking material to his mistress. Mr. Petraeus resigned from his post at the CIA back in 2012 after it emerged he was having an affair with his biographer, Paula Broadwell. He could have faced a year in prison after his guilty plea 2 months ago. He led the 2007 troop surge in the Iraq War and served as commander of U.S. and NATO forces in Afghanistan. Mr. Petraeus reached a plea bargain with the prosecutors after admitting to leaking sensitive material to Miss Broadwell while she was working. Yes, Corey Evan, probation indeed. As I stated, prosecutors said he gave Mrs. Broadwell 8 binders of classified material back in 2011, which he had improperly kept from his time leading the war in Afghanistan. In a federal court in Charlotte, North Carolina, that's North Carolina, not South Carolina, Corey, he was sentenced to 2 years of probation and ordered to pay $100,000, and for our British audience, that's the equivalent of £64,400 for those in Britain who are tuning in tonight. Prosecutors recommend the same length of probation but a smaller fine of $40,000. Judge David Kessler raised the fine to reflect the seriousness of the offense. Appearing in court before sentencing, Mr. Petraeus apologized for his actions. When he left court, he thanked those who had supported him and added, quote, "I look forward to moving on to the next phase of my life." On to Congress now. On Wednesday evening, that was last night, for those of you listening on podcast, the Senate Finance Committee unanimously voted in favor of an amendment to discourage European participation in the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against the likes of Israel. Lodged in 2005 by Palestinian activists, the BDS movement, which is a worldwide effort to seize business with Israel in protest of its occupation of the Palestinian territories. But while individuals in European countries may elect to participate in the movement, there is no institutional EU policy to boycott, sanction, or divest from Israel properly. The amendment, which was tacked onto a larger piece of trade legislation that establishes congressional trade objectives, is intended to apply specifically to an emerging free trade agreement between the U.S. and Europe. While the language of the amendment does not directly specify punitive action against countries that boycott Israel, The implication is that the U.S.-EU free trade relations are conditional upon European countries abstaining from the BDS movement. The New York Times is suggesting Hillary Clinton took actions as Secretary of State because of financial donations that were made to the Clinton Foundation by Russians pushing for a Canadian uranium company. The Times reported in an explosive piece today that Canadian records show the chairman of the Russian-owned Uranium One gave $2 million in donations to the Clinton Foundation, which the Clintons didn't disclose. At the same time, Russia pushed for control of a Canadian uranium company, the previous one that I reported. A Kremlin-connected bank promoting stock in the company also reportedly paid the likes of Bill Clinton $500,000 for a speech in Moscow. Eventually, the Russian-Canadian uranium deal was approved. Whether the donations played any role in the approval of the uranium deal is still unknown, the Times writes, but the episode underscores the special ethical challenges presented by the Clinton Foundation, headed by a former president who relied heavily on foreign cash to accumulate $250 million in assets, even as his wife helped steer American foreign policy as Secretary of State, presiding over decisions with potential to benefit the foundation's donors. The Times reporting comes from information it and other outlets, such as Fox News, obtained from an upcoming book, Clinton Cash, written by conservative author Peter Schwarzenegger. Staying with Clinton, Secretary of State Clinton tonight. Okay, Corey Evan has a comedic thing he wants to do right before I get to the next part of the Clinton story. Go ahead, Cor.
I just didn't think anybody ever there would ever use uranium for evil.
Okay, thank you very much, Uncle Billy. We'll take that under consideration. The chairman of a House committee investigating the 2012 attacks on Americans in Benghazi, Libya, on Thursday called Hillary Rodham Clinton to testify at a public hearing next month, setting up a high-profile showdown over the Democratic presidential candidate's use of private emails on her account and the server while she was Secretary of State. Representative Trey Gowdy of South Carolina says he wants Clinton to testify the week of May the 18th of this year and again before June the 18th of this year. The first hearing would focus on Clinton's use of private emails, and the second on the September 2012 attacks that killed 4 Americans, including the U.S. ambassador to Libya, Chris Stevens. While her cooperation and that of the State Department and Obama administration, Secretary Clinton could be done with the Benghazi Committee before the 4th of July, Gowdy said in a statement. It is necessary to call Clinton to appear twice because the committee needs to ensure we have a complete and responsive record and all the facts before we substantively question her on the Benghazi terrorist attacks, Gowdy said. Gowdy's action comes a day before the GOP-led panel signaled its final report could slip into next year, just months before the presidential election next year in 2016. Clinton is widely considered the frontrunner for the Democratic nomination for president, but ladies and gentlemen, I don't believe she'll be the only one running. There might be others running. She may win. She just may have a bit of a contest to do so. All right, back to the Washington, D.C. As far as politics go, Senator Ted Cruz went on the Senate floor early this afternoon to voice his strenuous objection to the nomination of Loretta Lynch as the next U.S. Attorney General. The current U.S. Attorney for Eastern District of New York will continue President Obama's abuse of power on immigration, Cruz warned. A few hours later, Cruz missed the final vote on Lynch's confirmation, making him the only senator recorded as not present. The newly declared presidential candidate did not impose invoking cloture, a procedural motion to end debate on the nomination before the final vote. The senator's office, when questioned about the vote, explained that he had to catch a flight to a fundraiser in Texas. His aides further argued that because more than 60 senators voted to end debate on the nomination, the final vote was largely symbolic. If the Senate could get 60 votes for closure, they could get 51 for final confirmation. Closure is the only vote that mattered, said Amanda Carpenter, the senator's communications director. Democrats, however, said the only Supreme Court nominees require 60 votes to invoke closure. They also noted that the senior senator from Texas, John Cornyn, voted for closure but against confirmation in the final vote. Cruz's fellow contenders for the GOP presidential nomination, Senators Marco Rubio from Florida and Rand Paul from Kentucky, respectively, voted against the Lynch confirmation. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I just got something small to say about this whole thing. You know what, Senator? If you say you're against the Lynch nomination, come out and just say it with your vote. I know you had a plane to catch, but you know what? The fundraiser could have waited. You could have actually voted on it. So, ladies and gentlemen, now we have 4 things why we should not vote for Senator Ted Cruz for President of the United States. And, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not approving this message. I'm just giving you the facts here on the Evan Miller Report. And that's the D.C. news tonight here on the Evan Miller Report. Now, with tonight's lawsuits across America, here's Corey Evan.
And now it's time for lawsuits across America. The cases are real. All rise for the Honorable Corey Evan.
There we go. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Please be seated. Lawsuits is now in session. 2 victims of identity theft have sued Intuit, the maker of TurboTax, claiming that poor security measures contributed to a possible spike in tax fraud this year. This from the Washington Post. In the lawsuit, which was filed Monday in the Northern District Court of California, the 2 taxpayers accused the company of not taking enough steps to protect customers' data or to stop criminals from using that info to file fraudulent tax returns and steal tax refunds. The victims also say the company did not do enough to let taxpayers and customers know when their info was used to file a fraudulent return. One plaintiff, Christine Diaz, said she hadn't used TurboTax since 2011 when she used the online version of the software to file a joint return for her and her husband. But in March, before she had filed this year's tax return, she said she received a bill for $242 from TurboTax for supposedly filing a federal tax return through the software, along with state returns in Michigan, Missouri, Ohio, and Oklahoma. Wow, 4 states. This sounds like fraud to me, ladies and gentlemen. The other plaintiff, Michelle...
syrup got a bit sticky.
Yes, it did. The other plaintiff, Michelle Fougat, alleged that she received a similar bill in March despite having never used TurboTax. Because of the suspicious return filed in her name, Fougat now has to file by paper and wait longer for her tax refund, according to the complaint. Richard McKeown, a lawyer representing the taxpayers, said his firm would seek class action status down the line to represent other tax victims, both TurboTax customers who had their personal info stolen from them, and non-customers who had their info stolen elsewhere but had fake tax returns filed in their names through TurboTax. Earlier this year, Intuit said that about 60% of the suspicious tax filings submitted through its software were from thieves who found people's personal info elsewhere but used the software to file a phony return. Gives me the hiccups just thinking about it. Total damages sought through the suit will depend on how many people were affected, how taxpayers' personal info was obtained, and if fraud victims lost money because of the fraud. Moving on to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, a former top finance official with the Georgia Lottery has filed a whistleblower lawsuit claiming that he was fired after refusing to present inflated sales projections. Kenneth Knight, former VP in financial management at the Georgia Lottery, names the lottery and its president, Debbie Alford, in the lawsuit. Knight argues that he was presented by Alford and his boss to present the lottery board with flawed sales projections in April 2014. Knight says in the lawsuit that he told his boss about problems with the numbers, but that they were presented to the board anyway. About a week after the board meeting, Knight said he was terminated from his job, quote, because of events that took place in March and April of 2014 during the budget process, which resulted in misleading info being distributed to our CEO and board. Says. Knight said he was fired to shift blame and cover up the fact that Alford knowingly presented the board with inflated figures, quote, an act by her that is both unethical and illegal, and which was motivated solely by unlawful political influence, they say. And with that, I will post up the third one on our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report, regarding unemployment figures in Michigan. You're going to want to read that. But I will declare today's lawsuits across America case dismissed because I've got 2 items to bring you in entertainment, which you're going to want to hear about. Chris Evans Representative Molly Kawachi sent the following statement to USA Today via email. Quote, yesterday we were asked about the rumors that Black Widow wanted to be in a relationship with both Hawkeye and Captain America. We answered in a juvenile and offensive way that rightfully angered some fans. I regret it and sincerely apologize. Susan Petricola, representative for Jeremy Renner, also sent this statement to USA Today. Avengers Age of Ultron stars Chris Evans and Jeremy Renner are under fire for an interview they gave to Digital Spy where they called Scarlett Johansson's character from the film a slut and a whore. When an interviewer asked about fans' unrealized hopes that Johansson's Black Widow would get together with either of their characters in the new sequel, Renner said, she's a slut. Evans laughed and agreed with him, saying, quote, I was going to say something along that line, a complete whore. Yeah, I know. That is strong stuff, I know. Yeah, of course that interview quickly drew backlash from fans. I mean, some people are actually fans of Black Widow for a reason other than Scarlett Johansson. And I hope that they weren't in any way referring to Scarlett Johansson as that sort of thing, because I think it's wrong to call anybody those things. Even if they are acting in that sort of way, you don't call them that to their face, because you're just asking not only for a slapping, but a suing in this industry. But even more uncomfortable, Jay, Dr. Phil McGraw raised eyebrows Wednesday night during an appearance on Jimmy Kimmel Live after he jokingly suggested Bruce Jenner's life-changing decision to transition into a woman at age 65 was pointless. Quote, Bruce and I have known each other casually for a while and we're around the same age, McGraw tells people in an exclusive statement. I've said long and loud it's never too late to make a life change, and I'm personally cheering him on, he says. I'm glad he's decided to set himself free in order to live his life authentically. It's his life and his body and his decision. More power to him. Whoa. Though the talk show host says he's happy for Jenner, McGraw's initial response when asked by Kimmel whether he wished that the former Olympian had chosen to talk to him instead of 2020's Diane Sawyer for his first interview about his transition sparked backlash. It would be boring to talk to me about that. I'm gonna say, look, if it's what you want to do it. I mean, what the heck does it matter what anybody else thinks? That'd be the first 30 seconds, and then I guess we'd spend the next hour 59 minutes saying, you're almost 80, what's the point? This is a theoretical exercise, right? I mean, he's kind of like past his prime, right? And although his intent may have been lighthearted, Marianne Dress, associate professor of the Marriage and Family Therapy program at USC, tells people the decision to transition later in life is no joking matter. Well, that much I can agree with. It's no joking matter at any point in your life if you undergo gender transformation. I mean, gender's an important characteristic for all of your life. And to suddenly change from man to woman or woman to man at any point in your life, that's going to create a lot of backlash for you, and it's really going to cause waves in the community as well. And I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this rather uncomfortable entertainment report with the box office numbers. Ex Machina, The Age of Adeline, and Little Boy are all coming to the theaters. This week at the box office, it was Furious 7 taking a furious lead with $29.2 million. Paul Blart Mall Cop 2 followed up with $23.8 million, and Unfriended with $15.8 million. And that's your entertainment report. Hope to entertain you and not gross you out tomorrow. Till then, I send it back to a very shocked Jason Miller.
Shocked indeed. Thank you very much, Corey. And due to time, here's the weather now with the BBC Met Office's Steve Denise.
The main story across North America is an area of low pressure to the south, located close to the Mexico-United States border, dragging in areas of very moist air into the deep south. This is generating severe thunderstorms, and some of these thunderstorms will be tornadic with the risk of some large hail through Friday and on into the weekend as well. It's largely settled on either side of this weather system. A lot of cold air engaged into an area of high pressure around the Great Lakes in towards northeast states, but with some sunshine. Some sunshine for the southwest corner, but an area of low pressure pushing in to British Columbia. The Pacific Northwest will keep skies rather cloudy here on Friday with some pretty heavy rain at times and with the air being quite chilly as well, some significant mountain snow. Rain is likely to continue here as we head on in towards the weekend. Generally sunny, though, across California, particularly for San Diego and Los Angeles. Turning a little bit warmer in Los Angeles through the weekend, but remaining very unsettled across this northwest corner. So that's how it's looking across the west. For the east, we will see temperatures slowly starting to rise, for example, in the New York area as we head on into the weekend. And it stays fine with high pressure here. But towards the southeast, although largely sunny skies on Friday, this area of thundery rain will continue to move eastwards as the weekend wears on. So risk of some downpours reaching Atlanta again, risk of some hail, and potentially even some tornadoes.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.